Om Swastiastu. Hello, Miss Rizka and all of my friends. Now we are group 3 will presentation and our material is about translation technique. Okay, before that, we will introduce ourselves. My name is Ning Lestari and my friend.
My name is Ersa Swandayani.
And the last one.
My name is Putu Aprilia Puspayanti.
Okay, and then our topic today is about definition of translate, definition of technique, definition of translate technique, characteristic of translation, translation technique, and the last is types of translation technique. Okay, and now the material will be presented by myself. Definition of translation. Translation is the process of returning an original or source text into a text in another language. Okay, according to Oxford English Dictionary, translation is the writer or spoken expression of the meaning of word, speech, book, etc. Meaning of word, book, speech, etc. is another language. There are many definitions of translation given a linguistic. And then Newmark also explained that translation is the transfer of the meaning of a text into another language in accordance with its meaning. Text into another language as intended by the author. The challenge is to transfer as many words as possible from the source language into the target language. And then I will explain you about definition of technique. Based on Collins English Dictionary, a technique is a practical method, skill, or art applied to a particular task. Nah, this means techniques is used for particular tasks particularly, and then Maselli also state the technique relates to practical things and problem solving. Now, the word technique itself refers to a way of doing an activity that needs skill and competence. And then, so what translation technique? So what the translation technique? Translation of definition of translation technique is a procedure to analyze and classify how translation equivalents work. Nah, Molina and Albir propose a definition of technique of a translation which is based on two premises. Number one is the need to distinguish between method, strategy, and technique. Number two is the need for analysis and functional concept of the translation technique. And Molina and Albir also define translation technique as a procedure to analyze and classify how translation equivalent works. Therefore, the techniques of translation can be defined as the way used the translator to translate smaller units of language like word, phrase, or expression from the source language into the target language. And then characteristic of translate techniques. Number one, we have 5 characteristics. Number one is they affect the result of the translation. Number two is they are classified by comparison with the original. Number 3 is they affect micro unit of text. Number 4 is they are by nature discursive and conceptual. And then the last, number 5, is they are functional. From these 5 characteristics, it can be seen that the translation technique can influence the translate result, which means that not all sentence or book can that are translated are 100% the same. Sometimes some are even different, but efforts are made to be close to the original, and accuracy must be maintained. The second is classified based on comparison with the original, which means whether the parable is appropriate to the language, that region or country. and everything else must also appropriate to the context and not deviate from the meaning of the text. And then I will also explain you about types of translation. Number one is borrowing. Nah, borrowing is a strategy used by taking word of the source language in the target language. The borrowing technique is a technique of a borrowing word from the source text and the borrowing them to the discussed by the target as a result of the translation. Now, borrowing techniques are divided into two types, namely pure borrowing and naturalist borrowing. Pure borrowing is a technique without changing word from the source language. For example, the word sandwich from source text to sandwich to target text. There is absolutely no change because it is pure borrowing without changing the word at all. And then number two is naturalist borrowing. It's a technique that make word from the target language by adjusting the sound, writing, or pronunciation of word in the target language. Now, for example, the word group, G-R-O-U-P, in the source text become a group, G-R-U-P, in the target language, in the target text. It is used to make the word feel more natural. And I also have the example. Number one is small, and source language is small, and the target language is small too. And number two is aesthetic in source language, and the target language is aesthetic. Number three is pencil in the source text, and the target text is pencil. And then number four is pizza in source text, and then pizza 2 in the target language. And like I said before, group in the source text, and the target text is group. Nah, mall and pizza can this is pure borrowing, and an aesthetic, pencil, and group is a naturalist borrowing. And then number two is calcu. Calcu is a translation technique used by translating a word or a foreign word literally. Nah, similar to borrowing technique, the similarity is the calcu and borrowing techniques are the same. Translate word by translating their lexical and structural elements. Lexical elements mean elements of the actual meaning of the word. Meanwhile, structural mean the arrangement of word. Nah, in other words, the translation of the calcu technique based on the meaning of the words and their arrangement. The main characteristic of the calcu technique is that it can translate word or phrase. Meanwhile, its borrowing technique can only translate word. Now, this technique explain first before explaining, or adjective first, then noun, or adjective first, before noun. And I have an example. Source text is shop hat. The target text is kepala tuku. Source text is good person. Target text is orang baik. Number three is bad pollution in source text, and the target text is polisi buruk. And then number four, beautiful girl, and the target text gadis cantik. And the last one, source text is secretarial general, and the target text is sekretaris general. Like I said before, adjective verbs then noun. Like in the example, like beautiful girl. Beautiful is adjective, and then girl is a noun. And then good person too, like that. Good is adjective and person is a noun, just like that, and so on. And then number three is literal technique. Literal technique is the translation method that focus on the short text. Now, literal technique is also as a literal translation technique. Literals mean that the translation carried out using literal translation technique will only translate word, but its term of meaning, the message might not be conveyed. Now, if we look at the target language, we will understand the apart from the translating lexically. Literal translation also translate word by adapting the structure of the target language, but there is one thing missing from the sentence, namely meaning. And I also have the example. Number one is piece of cake in the source language, and then in the target language is sesuatu yang mudah. In the search tag is one cold nine. Target text is sangat bahagia. And then number three is not my cup of coffee. Search tag in the target text is bukan sesuatu yang saya suka. And the search tag is feeling blue. And the target text is merasa sedih. And the last one is search tag have a while of a time. And the target text is sangat merasa senang dengan diri sendiri. Nah, like I said before, there is one thing missing from the sentence, namely its meaning. Like the example is feeling blue. If we translate to just to Indonesian, bahasa Indonesian is feeling is merasa and blue is blue. But if we translate to or with literal technique, it is the meaning is merasa sedih, not merasa biru like that. And then like I said, there is one thing missing from the sentence. What the source tag means, it is translated to target text that can be different meaning. Okay, and then the next materi is synonym will present or explained by my friend Aprilia. Time is yours.
Okay, thanks for your time. Now I will explain to you about the types of translation techniques. Number 4 is synonym. As you can see on the slide, synonym is a strategy used by finding the most similar word for the target language. English words have similarities to other words that have different meanings. Synonyms do not reduce the full meaning. They just adjust to the context of the word that accompanies it in the sentence. In English, synonyms can appear in a sentence, a whole paragraph, or reading, and can also be with related sentences. The synonym can be said to be a standard word which does not change and does not experience development in the future. To make it easier to find synonyms, you need to have a wide vocabulary. The method is to read a lot so you can remember many synonyms words. Next slide, please. So for me, I think you guys don't find difficulty when you try to know or understanding about synonym, because in Indonesian subject we got this synonym, or in bahasa is synonym, persamaan kata. So maybe you guys understand about what is synonyms, but I just want to provide you some example. Number one is she is very kind. From the search tag and the target text, dia sangat baik. Search tag is can I help you for number one, and the target language is bisakah aku membantumu. Number three is I'm so beautiful. In target language, saya sangat cantik. And number four, for the search language, he looks very happy. And the target language is dia terlihat sangat bahagia. And the last one is you make me strong as source text, a source language, and the target language or target text is kamu membuat saya kuat. As you can see on the underline, there is a synonyms. There's no change, and yeah, I hope you guys understand about this because we got it when we learn Indonesian subjects. And next slide, please. Okay, number 5 is adaptation. As you can see on the slide, adaptation is used to find the cultural equivalency of source language in the target language. If you look at the basic words, adaptation means take, but according to Molina and Albier's theory, adaptation is a technique used especially for words that have cultural value or that have cultural elements. This technique translates sentences that are adapted to cultural elements. When we talk about cultures, we will discuss all the things that are included in the tradition, habits, and behaviors in the source language and target language. Well, then a word in the source language may not translate in the target language. Why? Because the word in the source language does not necessarily have an equivalent in the target language. An example is sawah. As we know, sawah is usually a place to grow rice, but try to see the meaning of the word sawah in English. There it will be translated into field. In fact, field means field. If you investigate based on the linguistic meaning, it is actually not suitable. The problem is that the field is dry, not like sawah. But since English and Indonesian speakers have different cultures, and the closest equivalent word to sawah in English is field, so the word field was adapted as a translation of sawah. Next slide, please. So, as you can see on the slide, I provide you 5 examples of adaptation techniques. Number 1 is don't cry over the spilled milk. And the target text is nasi sudah. Number 2 is 1,700 feet high, and target text is 1,700 ketinggian. And number 3 is 25 stone, and the target text is 25 kilo. Number 4 is half past 12, and the target language is setengah satu atau pukul setengah satu. And the last one is silky smooth skin, and the target text is kulitnya selembut sutra. Okay, next. Okay, next I want to explain to you about cultural equivalence. As you can see on the slide, cultural equivalence is a strategy that replaces a special word in the source text with another special word in the target text. Language and cultures go hand in hand. For a translative judgment to be a fair judgment, it must be both cultural equivalent and linguistically equivalent. Cultural equivalence guarantees that any cultural connotation are not lost or picked up in translation. To achieve this, responsive translation linguists adapt and improve its item as necessary so that respondents can understand what is being asked of them as expected. Even in cases where cultural equivalence might not exist, responsive translation is committed to ensuring that your translated and adapted assessment are ready to measure what they are designed to measure, no more, no less. And next slide. So this is the example of cultural equivalence. Number 1 is the night watch. Watch as a short text. Target text is garda malam. Number 2 is security post, and target text is pos kamling. Number 3 is committee, and the target text is panitia. Number 4 is aromatic ginger, and the target text is kencur. And the last one is short text is community service, and the target text is kerja bakti. Okay, next. So number 7 is contextual conditioning. As you can see on the slide, contextual conditioning is to give some information in the context to make the message of the source language sounds clear in the target. Contextual conditioning is the placement in information in context so that the meaning is clear and accurate. For the reader who wants information so that there will be no misunderstanding for the reader when reading a translated text, or the reader will not be confused when reading a translated text. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the example of contextual condition. Number 1 is I like musangking, and and the target text is aku suka durian musangking. Number 2 is my father adopted Chihuahua, and the target text is ayah saya mengadopsi anjing Chihuahua. Number 3 is she loves peony, and the target text is dia suka bunga peony. Number 4 is she's eating lollipop, and the target text is dia sedang memakan permen lollipop. And the last one is my mom is cooking lemonilo, and the target text is ibuku sedang memasak mie lemonilo. As you can see on the target text, there are like a durian, anjing, bunga, permen, and mie that is a provide accurate information for the reader, so the reader will be not misunderstanding about the information on the text. And next slide. Okay, the last one. And okay, I will explain about established equivalent. As you can see on the slide, established equivalent is to use a term or expression recognized by dictionary or language in use as an equivalent in target language. Or established equivalent is a translation technique for the same situation using a completely different place. It aims to make the word to be translated understandable to the reader and certainly does not lose the meaning of a word or sentence in a translated text. Next slide, please. So this is the example of established equivalent. Number 1 is her mother-in-law is very kind, and the target text is ibu mertuanya sangat baik hati. As you can see on the underlined text, for the number 1 is in-law. If we translate in bahasa, mother-in-law, when we translate word by word or one by one, mother is ibu atau mama, in dalam, and law is hukum. If we translate one by one in word by word, the meaning is ibu dalam hukum. But since we use established equivalent as the translation techniques, the target text will be ibu mertuanya sangat baik hati. So number 2 is Malaysia. Malaysia is part of Southeast Asia, and the target text is Malaysia termasuk bagian dari Asia Tenggara. Number 3 is my mouth gets watered every time I see burgers. And the target text is mulutku berair setiap aku melihat burger. If we translate watered, as you can see on number 3, the underlined word is watered. If we translate in bahasa Indonesia, watered meaning is berair. But actually, the target text for number 3 is mulutku ngiler setiap aku melihat burger. So the meaning will be same, but we use like a different place. And number 4 is, have you ever been to Bali? And the target text is, apakah kamu pernah pergi ke Bali? Uh, Actually, when we translate, apakah kamu pernah pergi ke Bali in English, and we don't know the grammar, we can translate it to, have you ever gone to Bali? But since we use established equivalent, the translate in English is, have you ever been to Bali? And the last one is, sincerely yours. And the target text is, hormat kami. Okay, next. Okay, now I will explain to you about generalization techniques. As you can see on the slide, generalization is used to use a more general or neutral term. It use a more neutral expression in the target language. Generalization technique is a translation technique used to translate specific terms into general terms, which make it easier for us to understand the meaning of the translated text. So, as not to be confused, uh, let's the example. So, next slide, please. So, here are some examples of these techniques. Number 1 is grumpy, and the target text is pemarah. But let's look at one of the example in number 4. The short text is, it takes me an hour to get to Denpasar by motorcycle or car. There is a slight difference in the short text and the target text. The difference is in the translation of the name of the vehicle. See, the short language mentioned two vehicles, right? The car and motorcycle. But something different is in the translation. There are no vehicle names at all, and only kendaraan darat. Now, the example shows that the generalization technique changes something specific into a more general form. We can see that there are similarities between motorcycle or car. Both are kendaraan umum, right? Or land vehicles. So, it is very possible if the translation of the word motorcycle and car is translated into kendaraan darat. And as you can see on the last one, do you prefer to take the bus or a taxi? Bus and a taxi, we can translate to kendaraan umum, right? So this is the same like a number 4. So we just need to translate the specific word into a general word. Okay, next slide. Last one, I will explain to you about particularization. As you can see on the slide, particularization is to use a more precise or concrete. The particularization technique is the opposite of generalization. So in short, the particularization technique is a translation technique that translates general terms into specific terms. To make it less confusing, let's just look at the example. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of this technique. First one is lodging, as source text and the target text is hotel or villa. Number 2 is public transportation and the target text is bus or train. Number three is junk food, and the target text is burger or pizza. Number four is handphone, and the target text is Oppo, Samsung, or iPhone. And the last one is mineral water, and the target text is aqua or le mineral. As you can see, in this technique, we translate a word that was originally general into a more specific one. Okay, alright, that's all for me, and the next material will be explained with my friends. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the time. So I want to continue the types of translation technique. Okay, number 11 is compensation. Compensation is used to introduce a short stack element of information or stylistic effect in another place in the target text because it cannot be replaced in the same place as in the short stack. This means that when translating using this compensation technique, you can have to pay attention to each element because the placement of the element cannot be replaced in the same place as the short stack, which is a rule that must be followed when using this technique. Next slide, please. So this is the example of compensation. You can see in the on the number 3, never did she visit her aunt in the source text, and in the target text is wanita itu benar-benar tega tidak menemui bibinya. And next, a pair of ski shorts in the source text, and in the target text is sebuah gunting, and the last one is I was looking for you, your highness, in the source text, and in the target text is saya mencari Anda yang mulia. Okay, next slide please. Okay, number 12 is transposition. Transposition is to change a grammatical category. This strategy is used to translate clauses. This equivalence in this technique, the translation changes to structure of the source text to get the equivalence in the target text. The equivalence refers to how the message in the source text is either fully, completely, or not equivalently presented in the target text. Usually, this transformation will be in the form of changing from singular to plural, the position of adjective, and changing the overall sentence structure by separating or combining two clauses into one sentence in the target text. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the kind of transposition. Number one, transposition used as an obligatory because of grammatical structure. It means that the translator must use this procedure to translate the text in the transposition technique. Okay, the transposition used as an obligatory uh, have two kinds. Namely, number one is English plural noun shift into singular noun in Indonesia. For example, source text in source text a pair of glasses. In the target text, sebuah kacamata. And number two, the reposition of adjective in Indonesia shifts into the reposition of nouns in English. For example, in source text, gedung-gedung di Bali bagus-bagus. And in the target text is the buildings in Bali are built beautifully. Next slide, please. And number C, and number 3, adjective plus noun shift into noun plus adjective. For example, in the source text, beautiful woman, and in the target text is wanita cantik. Next slide, please. Okay, number 2, transposition used when the grammatical structure of source language is nothing in the target language. The translator will use this kind of shift if he finds that none of the equivalent grammatical structure exists in the target language. This translation used when the grammatical structure have two types. Number 1 is an object cannot be put in the beginning of a sentence in English as Indonesia. For example, in the source text is buku itu harus kita bawa, and in the target text is we must bring the book. Number 2, type 2 is a verb in the beginning of a sentence is not common in English except to make an imperative sentence. For example, in the source text is telah disahkan penggunaannya, in the target text is its usage has been approved. Next slide, please. Okay, the kinds number 3 is transposition used because of the naturalization terms. It happens when a text can be translated literally, but their translation results in a sound that is unnatural. This transposition have two types, like number 1, noun in the source language shift into verb in the target language. For example, in the source text, to train intellectual men for the pursuit of an intellectual life. In the target text is untuk melatih para intelektual untuk mengejar kehidupan intelektual. And the types number 2 is adjective plus noun of the source language shift into noun plus noun in the target language. For example, in source text, medical student, and in the target text is mahasiswa kedokteran. Next slide, please. Okay, number 3, particle clauses of the source language shift into full sentence in the target text. For example, in the source text, the approval signed by the doctor is valid. In the target text, persetujuan yang ditandatangani oleh dokter. And the last one is noun plus adjective of the source language shift into noun plus clause in the target text. For example, in the source text is thinking person, in the target text is orang yang berpikir. Next slide, please. Okay, number 4 is transposition used to set language gap as affixes. The affixes include lah or pun in Indonesia or an, at, and less in English, caused by the shift from word to clause. For example, in the source text is deliberate, and the target text is dengan sengaja, tenang, dan berhati-hati. Next slide, please. The types of number 13. Modulation. Modulation is a way used by translator to see the message of the source language from different angle. This technique used when a literal translator produces an unnatural translation. Modulation has the function to shift the meaning of the language in a sentence to be translated. So the message of the source text can be clearly understood by the target reader. Shifting here means changing the point of view of the text. For example, in the target text is "You break my heart." In the in the target text is "Kamu mematahkan hatiku." Next slide, please. So this is the kinds of modulation. Number one is modulation made as compulsory. Modulation made as compulsory is used when the translator cannot find the equivalent words or sentence in the target language. Modulation made as compulsory have two types, namely, number one, an active structure of source text shift into passive in the target language. For example, in the source text, the problem is hard to solve. In the target text is masalah itu sulit dipecahkan. And the type number two is the subject structure of the source language is combined in the target language. For example, in the source text, buku tersebut telah disahkan penggunaannya oleh John. And in the target text is the use of the books has been approved by John. Next slide, please. Number two is free modulation. Free modulation is used because of non-linguistic problems. These non-linguistic problems related to the problems that are present outside of the language itself. This free modulation have two types, namely, number one is implicit information of the source language shift into explicit information in target text. For example, source text in the source text, environmental degradation. In the target text is penurunan mutu lingkungan. And the type number two is clause effect, prepositional phrase of the source language shift into clause effect clause in the target language. For example, in the source text is we all suffer from the consequence of environmental degradation. In the target text is kita semua menderita karena adanya penurunan mutu lingkungan. Next slide, please. Number 14. Addition. Addition is a strategy used by giving additional information to the target language as an obligatory. Addition are also used to focus meaning, so they have the purpose of getting a clear meaning of a text. This information is usually placed within the text below the text are footnotes or at the end of the text as endnotes. The addition words that are added only to complement the meaning, not effect to change the meaning of a sentence. Next slide, please. This is the example of addition. In the source text is saya dosen, and in the target text is I'm a lecturer. And number two, In the source text is dia tidak suka kamu. In the target text is she does not like you. Number 3, in the source text is kamu harus pulang. In the target text is you should go home. Number 4, in the source text is suami saya polisi. In the target text is my husband is a police. And the last one is saya punya mobil. In the target text is I have a car. Next slide, please. Okay, the types number 15 is amplification. Amplification is a technique used by paraphrasing implicit information of the source language in the target language. This technique is used to translate phrases that don't have equivalents in the target language, such as sarung, batik, gado-gado, and so on. So, to translate this type of phrases, the translation needs to add notes to represent the contextual meaning of the phrase so that the reader can understand the target text easily. The notes can be put on footnotes or endnotes. Next slide, please. There are example of amplification. Number 1, in the source text is galungan or in Balinese. In the target text is Hari Raya Umat Beragama Hindu. Number 2 is Ramadan or in Arabic. In the target text is Bulan Puasa Kaum Muslimin. Number 3 in the source text is Panito. In the target text is traditional cake eaten on New Year's Eve. Number 4 in the source text nasi tumpeng. In the target text is boiled rice designed in the shape of cone. And the last one is celengan. In the target text is a box made of soil designed in the form of wild boar for saving money. Next slide, please. The types number 16, reduction. Reduction is also called as omission or deletion. Deletion. Omission is used by omitting word of the source text in the target text. This omission is made because the words are not very important and difficult to translate into the target language. In addition, reduction means an action in use to reduce the language component of the source language. It used to make it easier for translator to translate the source text into the target text. Next slide, please. There are the example. Number 1 is in the source text, the month of fasting. In the target text is Ramadan. Number 2, in the source text is just an equitable treatment. In the target text is hubungan yang adil. And number 3, in the source text, automobile. In the target text is mobil. Number 4, in the source text is the treaty was proclaimed null and void. In the target text is perjanjian itu dinyatakan tidak berlaku. And the last one, in the source text is the proposal was rejected and repudiated. In the target text is usulnya ditolak. Next slide, please. And the last one is discursive creation. Discursive creation creation is establishing a temporary equivalence that could never be anticipated out of context. This technique is often used in the translation of film and novel titles. Next slide, please. There are some examples of this type. Number one is Simali Kundang in source text. In the target text is a betrayed soon is Malik Kundang. Number two, in the source text is Lat Bali, and in the target text is Bali Strait. Number three, in the source text is the Good Father. In the target text is Sang Good Father. Number four, in source text is the general spoken, and in the target text is Sang General angkat bicara. And the last one in source text is fallen angels, and in the target text is malaikat yang dikutuk. Okay, that's all of my material, and the next slide will present by my friends. Training times is yours.
Okay, guys, thanks for listening our presentation. That's all about our presentation. I explained my my material and all of my friends too. Ersa and Aprilia too have explained their material. And have any question, guys? Have you any question? If you have any question, you can write down in your notebook, and you can ask me or we can discuss in the Zoom meeting later. Okay, thank you for watching our video. We will close it with Karma Santi. Om Santi 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 Om. Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.